Hello again. Thank you. If you could maybe take your seats. We collected this fine group of gentlemen. I'll say that loosely. They're nice guys anyway. There was a lot of talk on alluding to finance. This is the finance conversation, and I made some comments about some of the things we might explore a little more in my opening remarks, which seems like 1,000 years ago, but a lot of people have stuck it out. Thank you for making it through the postprandial period. So early stage, it's called Retina drug development financing, but this is any Retina product development. It's not specific to drugs, and there are people up here who are working in device as well. I'm going to list the names. I'm going to allow the guys to introduce themselves and their title and their company. Rob Rothman, James Murray, David Esposito, and Russ Trenery. Why don't you start, David, and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ross. David Esposito, CEO of Onel Therapeutics. Excited to be a part of the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. James Murray, your partner at Excite Ventures and a founding partner at Excite Ventures, and excited to get up here and chat with these guys.
Russ Trenery, President and CEO of Outlook Therapeutics.
I'm Rob Rothman. I am the co-founder and co-managing member of Infocus Capital Partners. I am also, very shockingly, a glaucoma specialist who has just sat through 6 of the most painful hours of my life. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Rob. Rob is indeed an interloper, and I invited him, and I have no idea why I did this, because Rob and I love to battle in calls, and this is well known to at least James and maybe some other people in the audience. In fact, I found out later and secretly from James and I think Ron Weiss, Rob's partner at Infocus, that Rob had set an over-under line on how many seconds it would take him to say F you, Rob. So, Rob, what's the latest? What are we at?
You're way past it already.
Wait, I'm already over the 21 seconds.
You're all set. You're all set.
So we're good. We don't have a new betting line on Rob irritating the retina doctor. All right, let's start. We have here 2 CEOs, 2 VC guys. They bring a different take on the same idea. We heard how badly the economy is going, but I gave you a positive twist. Now we'll hear from the experts. Is it really positive? Is it really a disaster? Is the sky falling? We'll see. So I'm going to turn the tables a little on the questions we usually might ask or receive in VC. We're usually asked, like, well, what kind of companies are you looking for and that sort of thing. And the corporate guys are often asked, well, how do you raise money? So we're going to ask the VC guys a little bit about how they raise money, because back before any of this happens in this meeting, those guys got to raise money first. And that's always the challenge to everything, as we've heard from the corporate people. It's also a challenge for the VC and private equity people. So Rob, let's start with you. Biggest challenges to raising capital in 2022, specific to this year, this economy, this macro economy, and any particular points regarding biotech and or ophthalmology and or retina in itself. And you are an investor in a retina company, I know that.
Yes.
You don't like to admit it.
Under duress, but yes, we did.
Why don't you start? What are the challenges? What are the easy parts, if there are any?
Yeah, so, it's an interesting question. It's sort of relevant to us right now, having closed our first fund at the earlier part of this year, end of last year, and are now contemplating the launch of the second fund. This is sort of a very weird time, I think, for finance in general. Interestingly, as you pointed out in your opening comments, the financial world's in a little bit of a free fall at the moment. But interestingly, funding in alternative assets doesn't seem to be affected that much. I think as people lose luster with the stock market, there is a lot of sideline capital and dry powder that people are looking to deploy into things that are attractive. It doesn't make it easier for us as a fund, especially being a specialized fund in ophthalmology, but it certainly gives us a little bit of hope to see that there is still a significant amount of money looking to be deployed into life sciences. And you don't have to be, a retina specialist to realize that, there's a lot of activity in the retina space. And notice I avoided saying brain surgeon and glaucoma specialist. Right?
We're not brain surgeons after all.
So there's a lot of opportunity. And as we look, I think, to go out and engage in a raise for our second fund, the fact that there is still so much unmet need in ophthalmology, and I know this may be a shock to most of you, but retina is not the only area of excitement in ophthalmology.
We heard
There-
today glaucoma is a retina disease.
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, I want to thank you all for, retina specialists are already better looking, smarter, and better paid than glaucoma specialists, and now you're going to treat our disease, which is very exciting. So thank you for that. But no, you're right. I mean, the reality is that there's a real, opportunity for funding in ophthalmology and in retina. So it's scary times because people are coming down on us a little harder. And I think they're going to be a lot more scrutinous of what we do. They're going to want to see our prior fund performance. They're going to ask the appropriate questions that James and I get asked all the time. But ultimately, there's a lot of money out there, and it's looking for a place to go. So this is as good a field in life sciences as any to receive capital.
Thanks. James, what do you think?
Well, first, I'm glad that you and Rob have had the opportunity to take this on the road now and share this act with everyone here on Broadway.
There'll be a wrestling match later.
Yeah. When you initially asked this question and told us that this would be a topic for discussion, I was like, man, nobody cares about our troubles and like how challenging the fundraising environment is or how we talk to LPs. But
James
of course,
always gives me these votes of confidence. Your talk sucks.
But of course, you're a step ahead and smarter than me for the reasons Rob just said. And it makes a lot of sense speaking to a room of entrepreneurs and founders and innovators that are trying to get funding, because to know where we are in our funding cycle is extremely important. And what's going to fit? What's the check size? Where do we invest? Rob mentioned being late stage in one fund, so that's going to impact at what cycle the next investment they can make, and how quickly how much they're going to pressure or feel pressure to get to an exit, right? So all of those things matter for us, so that dynamic really matters. And then the other thing I would stress, at least the 3 VCs on this stage right now, we're all fund entrepreneurs, right? So we actually have a lot in common with the innovators out there, is that we noticed an inefficiency in the market, an unmet need, and that was the need for financing at the early stage of life science investment, and here in ophthalmology, not just biotech, but as Rob said, also devices and diagnostics, and it's a very robust field. So while the biotech public markets have really suffered over the last year, that doesn't mean that there is an opportunity out there to invest in, as we just heard this entire day of incredibly compelling presentations. But it does mean that if IPOs dry up, and stay dried up for a while, we have some of these numbers out there, and Frost alluded to them this morning, that the amount of capital recycled into the ecosystem is going to be less. So then how do both us as fund managers think about that, and how does that impact our strategy, but also how does that impact the innovators side, and how you think about your next fundraise or an exit or a partnership. So, I think it was a smart question to ask to see how this ecosystem all fits together.
What about so does the overall, and this is for both of you, the overall market situation change the timing and strategy amount of a raise? Is that affecting how you view raising right now, what's going on in the public markets and so forth?
No, not for us. We have an idea of what we want to do with our second fund. And we have goals and targets that we believe need to be funded. And there are companies, I've spoken to, I would assume, almost everybody in this room at some point. And, we want to continue to do that and help propagate deserving companies so that they can succeed. That's our fundamental goal, right? We want to provide return to investors, but at the same time, and equally as important, is making sure that high quality, good science that's going to help patients gets into the world. Sort of that's what we do. And we're not going to do it unless we have the right amount of capital and the right amount of, the right LPs involved. It doesn't pay to go out there and try and do it half-assed, right? You have to have the money that you need. If you've got a goal, just like all of the CEOs here, you can't do your job if you're not properly funded. Well, neither can we. It's going to limit what we can do. It's going to be less rewarding. So we're going to go out there and do it. We think that, and we've invested with you guys a lot, and you know how it works, but ultimately, we have to go out there and raise the right amount of capital, and if we can't get it, we're going to have to delay, and that's just going to be the way it is. We're not launching unless we have what we need. So,
I agree. James, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think it. I'd echo what Rob said. It doesn't impact at all the fundamental value proposition of what we've identified in the marketplace or the companies that are coming to us. It may change the opportunity set in an additive way, right? So there may be some companies that are a little bit later stage. On a positive note, there is a ton of dry powder out there. I mean, Arch announced a $3 billion fund the other day, right? So there is a ton of dry powder for therapeutics and therapeutic and life science investment. They are looking at early stage, but that also means that there might be an opportunity set at that middle stage, right? Because those funds need to write $50 million checks, minimum often, to move the needle. And the companies may only need a $25 million check to kind of get to that next inflection point. So I think if anything, for us, opportunistically, it grows the amount of companies that we're looking at.
Understood. So let's turn to my good friends, the CEO types now, who raise money in different ways. Let's talk about raising money. This is kind of the challenge for those two. It's the challenge always for you guys too, among a million other things. What about those early raises, pre-Series A, Series A raises? What types of presentations or milestones do you put in your mind or in front of guys like Rob and James with regard to how much the raise is going to be? What's the timing of the milestones? How specific are the expectations for those milestones? How tightly do you lay that out, and how important is that? David, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start with a couple comments. I mean, I think it is very different than perhaps seeking the capital to run a later stage program for sure, and where you have lead times and length of programs much longer. I think in the seed and early stage, typically you're bringing to the table a base case, but you have to remain very flexible because you're not raising money in a very static environment. As you're out, I mean, maybe some guys are closing deals in 3-6 months, but typically you're on a 6 to 12 month run on raising capital, and the flexibility comes as you're still accumulating small amounts of data in those early stage seed, Series A environments, and you've got to be able to position those new data points in the best way possible to raise capital for that. So I do think the milestones get much shorter because the data points are, the studies or what you're doing is a little shorter, but you've just got to maintain a level of flexibility as that data unfolds while you're still in the throes of pitching and adjusting the plan to be just aware of what may be the needs in the marketplace that way for sure.
How, and then I'm going to go to you, Russ, on all these as well, but how specific do the potential investors ask you to be, and how realistic are sometimes those questions about when will this occur and when will that occur? How do you handle that? We ask that question, and we're in the eye business, so we understand maybe your position a little better than some of the more gigantic VCs who are coming in later typically, but maybe they're coming in earlier this time. How flexible are they with that? Are they open to your discussion and dialogue about that fluidity that you were just referring to?
I think it comes down to clarity of a base case and a plan and what the expectations are, and a really good discussion about the risks that are inherent in just the next stage of getting to that data point. That is usually the base case, just to manage expectations and create the reality of what you're entering to. But then the other piece I think comes down to very practical, day-to-day tactical communications as the plan continues to come forward, so that nobody perhaps goes silent for a couple months and all of a sudden gets surprised with a delay or a data point that didn't quite come together. And so I think it starts with that base case, but then it's, I think good traditional consistent communication as things unfold, so that I think most people we're in this together to figure out what's going on. It can be a little bit more, rational on the timelines. If they shifted, what was the reasoning to be able to handle it that way.
Thank you. And as someone who's invested in David's company, he does communicate incredibly well with, at minimum, monthly detailed emails about where the company is. It's phenomenal, and it's not universal. You get a lot of credit for that. Russ, what's your take on that raising? I know you're in a public company now. I want to come back to that, specifically with the public markets, but you've been on both sides, I'm sure. What's your take on setting up the pre-Series A, Series A? How detailed, how vigorous of a raise is that?
Yeah, so I think the trick for when you're in a pre-Series A is to take complex subjects and be able to explain that to a high schooler. You've got to be able to boil down what you're trying to accomplish in a very common sense way. And, I think one of the places that my companies have had success in the past had to do with wealthy friends or family offices, I think have become a bigger and bigger component of getting a company from an inspiration to something that's more practical. Especially when you can find family offices who have a history of the problem in their family. They've got, so if you have passion for solving a problem, and it's a big problem, and I think this is the easy part in ophthalmology, in my opinion. Everybody wants to be able to see really well, forever. And everybody perceives any anomaly in their vision as a big problem. And so I think this is a kind of a luxury that we have, we don't have to make people care. You might have to make people care about a better way of getting copper out of the ground, but you don't have to make people care about eyesight. So I think that is one advantage that we have. And so it's really explaining the problem and the nuances of the problem, the size of the problem, because ultimately, even the family offices, or maybe especially, they want to make money too. So at the end of the day, the VC, one of my most valuable lessons in dealing with the VC were, when before the end of your first meeting, and I'm talking like you're only in B or raising your C round, and their question is, how am I going to get out of this?
Right.
What is the end game? What gigantic, multi-billion-dollar companies are there that are out there? They're going to want what you have. But that's a problem of I don't find that as much in the family offices. It does come up, sometimes because they also want to know. But to me, it's really taking those complex subjects and making them easy to understand, and then saying the way that we're going to know whether we're solving this problem or not is by doing this on the bench, this in the animal, and be able to lay out some concrete. And this is how long it's going to take. I only have a team of 10 people. This is how long it's going to take and how much money. And then if we prove that concept, you've got to have some notion as to, once we do this, then there are people like venture capitalists who do this for a living, and they'll be the next stage. They'll be part of the ecosystem.
So the institutional money, a little bit later, focus on the family offices in that pre-Series A or early Series A. I'm going to stay with you, Russ, for a minute because you have experience in the public market recently and now with Outlook. This is a little bit mysterious to me. Maybe you can help us understand when's the right time to go public? I know this is a nebulous question in some ways, but you've done it. And also in the post-IPO period, how does one raise capital then and when and for what purpose in that setting?
The best time to go public is when your investors want you to.
We like hearing that.
Market conditions play. When I first got involved in my first startup back when I was in my 30s, back then it was in the medical device arena in a different specialty, and we actually needed to be in a position where we were showing revenue. Because back in the old days, people weren't willing to bet on anything except for if they could see a couple of consecutive quarters. Now people have gotten, the venture guys have gotten a lot smarter, a lot bigger, and every situation is, I think is different, and market conditions will determine how risk averse your group are. Because what happens is, in some of my experiences, you'll have a couple VC in, all their funds will be at a different stage. Some good things will happen, some bad things will happen, whether it's to you or whether it's to your space or whether it's to the marketplace. And then if a couple of those things start cascading down, then the VC have to look at their portfolio and say, winner, don't know, not getting another dime, not getting another dime, not getting another dime. I need to keep my powder dry. And if you're in one of those not getting another dime category, it's hard.
You're dead.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
So,
I got it.
So anyway, once your investors have persuaded you as the CEO that this is the ideal time for them to cash out and to go IPO. And again, usually usually there hopefully will be a meeting of the minds. There won't be such a big disconnect in where everybody's fund maturity is that, can kind of serve as a barrier to the thinking, I think sometimes. But then once you're post-IPO, you are at the mercy of your equity value, no matter what. If your equity value are roaring, then taking on a little dilution at the time, is acceptable to most investors. If you're not in a position to do that, and you've got to get into more creative things like structured finance deals, like royalty-bearing deals, where somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I love your story. You don't even need $200 million right now, but I want to give it to you because I, the investor, want a royalty stream on your product that looks like this and some structured payments along the way in addition. And for the privilege of me giving you $200 million, I need $600 million back." It's expensive. But that's, I'll tell you, for us, there's like a new product that gets invented every day. Some of them look like retreads, but some of them are kind of creative and kind of a new way of thinking about it. But there are lots of different products that come out that are trying to meet the market conditions that you're in and allow the investor to win and the company to not be so overburdened on the payback or on the dilution side that the company can win as well.
Thank you. That does explain it, and that it has been for me an area I don't understand that well. Let's go back to our friends in VC, James and Rob. This is a more traditional question I might ask a VC early stage investor. I'll twist it a little bit. Tell us, rather than telling us what you're looking, this is for the founders in the group to hear this, not exactly what you're looking for in a company. We kind of know, we've talked about this a lot, we've even done it on the podium. What are the great aspects of a company you're looking for? What about the reverse? What are the negative signs when someone's pitching you for an investment, or maybe you've made an investment and they're pitching for a second phase of the investment? What are the negative signs both on the subtle level or on the deal breaker level, if you don't mind being as specific as that, James?
Yeah, so each of these guys have touched on them, David and Russ. And Russ, you said, boil it down to the simplest terms, right? And just to tell a brief anecdote, years ago when we started this, I was at a pitch, and I've heard a lot of pitches, and I can usually, dumb down, but explain it to these guys. But this founder and executive could not explain this concept to me in a simple way. And then they got so exasperated, they said, "Oh, just tell the docs, they'll understand." Oh, interesting. So, it comes down to just don't be a jerk, right? But really, you've got to have your pitch. And I just as we have to have our pitch when we talk to LPs, you've got to have that down in a clear, concise way to be able to tell that story as simply as possible. And then we can get into the things that David touched about on communication, right? And you have to be able to communicate what are those milestones? How are you going to generate data? How are you going to do it in a capital efficient way until that next stage of investor can come on? And so we can help out, right, and get you that far. And I think a big red flag is when there isn't an understanding of that, and you see a science project and something that doesn't have those clear milestones, or the second you start to dig into it, the assumptions that they've made clearly fall apart. So, that again comes down to doing your homework. I could go on for days about the number of red flags out there.
This doesn't apply to anyone here, just other people James has encountered in his travels.
And then, one more. The team, right? Do you have the team there? And it's fine to be an inexperienced CEO or founder, but are you humble enough and do you have the humility to want to bring along somebody that has that expertise? And we've certainly seen it. Both ways, without getting into any specifics, but we've seen it both ways, and it makes a huge difference to be able to have that perspective. And we've also seen teams that have very smartly assembled advisory boards that have, the drug delivery panel was earlier, right, that have decades and decades and decades and have worked on every important project in drug delivery, right, compared to other founders that will just present a slide of 100 advisors and act as if that is their validation, right? Well, we've got all these people signed up, they're very smart and accomplished, and you should invest based on this. And then we get into the questions and realize that things start to fall apart. So those are some of the red flags, some of the things beneath the surface. Rob, I'll leave some out there for
Rob,
you.
what do you think?
Well, look, I mean, it's no different than how you evaluate any relationship, right? There are certain red
I knew you
flags.
were going with the "it's not me, it's you," or "it's not you, it's me"
definitely you.
discussion.
It's definitely never me. So, I think those are important. You really have to get along with people, and if you're going to be an investor, I know like we are very interactive with the companies that we participate with, and we want to make sure that we have a good working relationship. So if you can't get along with us, it's going to be difficult for us to be an investor. On a more, microcosmic level, I do not, and I know most investors do not respond well to hyperbole. It doesn't pay to come to a bunch of ophthalmology-specific investors or people who are very familiar with the space and tell them how your company is worth $30 billion. It doesn't resonate well, and it comes off poorly to us. And I think it comes off poorly to most people. I think if you have realistic projections about what you think your asset is worth, it's important to include, but more important, at least to our early investors, is how much money do you need to get to specific milestones, at which point we believe you can either have a value inflection that will help us either participate at a second point or help you raise more money to get to the end point. That's what we need to know. We don't need to know that you think you're worth everybody's got a multi-billion-dollar product, and we get it. So I think that's a sort of a little one that shows up in presentations. There is a condition, it's been well documented, called founderitis, right? Founderitis is this incredible belief that an incredible scientist can do it all on their own. That they are a scientist, I have my idea, I built this product, I'm going to take it from here to a public exit. It doesn't generally happen. And if there is a general lack of sort of a reality check that you're going to need a significant amount of help, or a lack of self-awareness that you don't need other people to help you, then that's a problem for us. You need to have good finance people, good business people surrounding your science at all times, because it isn't a free-for-all and we don't have unlimited funds. So we need to make sure that these things are managed effectively. So I think that's sort of what we look for. We've joked about this in group diligence calls that we've had, that the first 3 check boxes of our diligence is management, management, management.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. Mostly. If you can't check off those 3 management boxes, then it's going to be difficult for us to deploy capital. So present a good story, be succinct, know what you're doing, and have the right people around you. I think that's the best way to raise capital.
Yeah, the moral is always you're investing in people more than you're investing in a product, although the asset obviously matters.
It's actually shocking that you and I have a relationship. I just basically just invalidated everything I just said.
You can see how easy he is to get along with, right? I mean, he's so easy. The guy's very concise, though, and straight. And that's the straight story from Rob. I'm glad you segued, because I want to ask David and Russ, similarly, for innovators and founders, in terms of corporate development and team building, et cetera, when is the right time for a founder to come to someone like you, professional CEOs, guys who've done it, who know how to do it, who have a certain team they're going to have to see or put together? When's the right time? Is there a time that's too late? And what do you need to see in that entity prior to accepting the position? David, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Russ.
Sure, I think in a lot of ways it does vary quite a bit sometimes. I mean, one of the other things, just like we're talking about timing of markets and investments, sometimes it's around timing of finding talent. Sometimes, as was talked about here, sometimes companies, perhaps the technology doesn't pan out, there's a good team there, and some of those folks are looking to come on board and support a team. So I do think, and certainly there's a lot of well-disciplined leaders in large companies now that are coming off time post-retirement, looking for opportunities that still might be able to contribute to early stage. So I do think there's a timing element for talent, just like in the market for financing. But I do think at any time, especially within a founder, just realizes the complexity has gone beyond the science to where it becomes a lot of operational aspects and discipline on executing a plan. That's usually a good window on bringing on some professional management to come in. And I think there's only so much early stage preclinical science that all of a sudden now it gets pretty operational. I think that's, to the point that was raised earlier, a bit of self-awareness of a founder and an investor team to realize when that's needed to be able to bring those people on. But then it really many times comes down to timing and finding the right people.
Russ?
Yeah, I think once the company morphs from a scientific problem to now an execution of the business, that's when you need to bring in a CEO. And you get there pretty fast, usually. And it doesn't mean the founder still can't have a role. You know, I've been at previous companies, my favorite ones that I was at, the founder stayed on as the chief scientific officer. Some of the most brilliant, wonderful people I've ever met. But, and there was almost an inverse correlation between their brilliance in science and their ability to be a good business person. You know, some of these founders have been the smartest person in the room for years. And so they know a lot. But then as soon as you're getting into even you know, regulatory strategy, how to execute, how to talk to doctors. I'm talking way pre-commercial before it's real business. But even that part, I think some founders can exert too much influence and not have professionals in there who know how to run those sides of the business.
I like the answer from both of you. I was maybe expecting to hear at certain financial development. What I heard was much more nuanced, which is really you're through the science, it's time to become a company and a professional company. And James and I have talked about this a lot. I'm sure Rob has experienced it. That's a tough decision. It's a little nebulous for a founder to know when that is, but you have to be looking at what you're doing and how people are responding to you. Someone like James or Rob in a pitch meeting may intimate certain things either through what they're saying directly or the fact that they're not interested in investing. Sometimes that may be the thought process you need to start entertaining is maybe they're concerned, I don't have a really professional company yet. We have seen assets which are pretty mature scientifically, more so than we expected, but that the corporate structure was super immature and thus was non-investable. So this is what I think is being talked about here. We have a few minutes. I want to give you each a chance to answer a very broad and kind of forward-looking question, but this is not a public company, so I can do it. Rob, we'll start with you. Basically, you're a glaucoma doctor, you know Retina, you've invested in it. Retina's done well in investing and in product development recently. Are we at the height? Is that going to continue? What's the broad look at Retina development, Retina financing, Retina product commercialization in the coming 3 to 5 years, 10 years?
You know, look, obviously I wouldn't want to be launching a second fund if I didn't think it was a target-rich environment for investment, right? Ophthalmology is unbelievably robust on the development side, and I hear it every time I speak to venture capitalists, private equity firms that are, multiple orders of magnitude bigger than us, who will say to me, well, ophthalmology is too specialized. They'll say, I don't understand, how could you just be a fund that does ophthalmology? And, think about what we're doing here just today, mostly talking about AMD and diabetic macular edema, right? I mean, that's mostly what we're looking at in terms of pharmaceuticals. So I think that we're nowhere near, solving retinal problems. Everybody's happy now. They don't have to worry about being unemployed. But, just in ophthalmology, we haven't solved anything. We just, we haven't solved a thing, really. And we're still working towards making people better. And we were at the same meeting, I think, when nobody from the FDA here, right? I can say what I want?
No, he's not here.
I can say what I want?
I think you meant he.
So somebody who we all know and love from the FDA was sitting on a panel who made it very clear that the job of the FDA was to approve cures, and that it was getting a little cumbersome looking at continuous, minute, stepwise increments in care delivery. They really want us to come up with real answers to disease. And from the quality of the science that I see presented to me every day, including what was shown to me here, most of which I've been aware of, but we're going to get there. we're going to get there eventually. We're going to actually solve some of these things. And the answer is maybe sitting in this room, maybe not, but hopefully we will be the ones to fund those companies and make it happen. But I love that. I love being a clinical ophthalmologist, and I love evaluating companies for investment. And I think we've got a bright, funding future ahead of us because we've got a lot of work to do.
Russ?
So I've been involved in optometry, cataract surgery, refractive surgery, glaucoma surgery, and now retina. And I think retina is right at the beginning to me. My first cataract procedure I was in, there was no viscoelastic used. Okay? So there's so much that's been done in the cataract field and in the refractive field with PRK and then LASIK and then back to PRK. I mean, there's been a lot of work that's been done there. But to me, glaucoma and retina are swells out in the ocean still. There's still people going blind. Nobody goes blind from cataract surgery.
Right.
So as long as people are going blind, I think retina's got a long runway. I think the things that we're doing right now are really important because preserving as much visual function as possible is a gift every day. But they're still going blind. So I think people are going to be in this room decades from now, really talking about some real miracles that don't exist right now.
James, what do you think?
I'll be brief. I'd echo everything these guys said, and then just a brief takeoff on some of the things that were presented today, some of the gene stem cell therapies, even some of the dry AMD solutions. Those are all going to need better ancillary solutions to the problems that they're solving. So on the gene stem cell therapy side, you're going to need things like robotic surgery to help place these things where they need to go. So that's an area we're interested in. And then on the diagnostic side, you're going to need high throughput diagnostic devices that enable the AI that the earlier panel was talking about as necessary to get treatments to patients earlier.
David,
I'll just
last
add
word.
some quick comments. I think used to be 5 or 10 years ago, if you just said the word immuno-oncology, people threw a lot of money at you. And now I think that's starting to change. And I really think where in ophthalmology and specific in retina is chock full for a lot of those dollars, given all the things that were said. And I would just add another point to what James said. I think the opportunity for diagnostics and machine learning to support identifying right patients, response to therapy is ripe for opportunity in retina and ophthalmology in general. And I think that's a wave of a lot of funding, great innovation in the future.
Thank you. We heard a lot about some of those things earlier. There was mention of better diagnostics for early dry AMD, et cetera, and there's people in this room doing that. I want to thank each of you. These guys are awesome. Rob and I joke around, but this is a very smart guy, great clinician, great investor. Thanks to all of you, Russ, James, David. Thanks all. Thank you.